It's 12 o'clock p.m. in Los Angeles. It's 3 p.m. in Cambridge, Massachusetts. On Wednesday, the 17th of November, 2010, I'm Mark Strassman, reporter with Utopia News. I'm about to speak to Jeffrey Miron, who is a senior lecturer and director of undergraduate studies in the Department of Economics at Harvard University and a senior fellow at the Cato Institute. Welcome to Utopia News.
Thanks very much for having me.
You wrote an op-ed piece about Prop 19 in California that would have legalized marijuana. Tell our viewers briefly what Prop 19 would have done exactly.
Prop 19 roughly would have legalized marijuana in California under California state law. It did it in a sort of slightly complicated way. It legalized the possession of an ounce for all adults 21 and over, and it authorized cities and towns to license the broader production and distribution of marijuana if they so chose.
Now, it lost, and you wrote in your piece why you thought it did. Tell our listeners why you thought Prop 19 didn't get the 50% of the vote that it needed to pass.
I thought it lost for several reasons. I think a fundamental reason is that the law in California, the change in California, would not have legalized marijuana under federal law. It would simply have changed the state law. And the Attorney General for the United States had announced that the federal government would continue to enforce the federal law in California. So that meant that California's Prop 19 would have been sort of in a legal limbo, in a gray area. And I think that made people nervous, especially because in many respects, marijuana is already legal there under their medical marijuana law. And I think they were nervous about sort of poking the feds in the eye and possibly sort of stirring up a hornet's nest. So that, I think, is the main reason. I think another reason is that some of the claims made for the benefits of Prop 19 were a bit overstated, and I think some of the hyperbole caused people who were initially sort of neutral on the issue, not necessarily supporters, to be a little suspicious of the arguments that the legalization community was making because they sounded a little too good to be true, and so I think that was problematic for the proposition as well.
Do you think that based on what you just said, I wanted to get your take on the fact that Arizona has just legalized medical marijuana. A number of states have legalized medical marijuana. Do you think then that legalizing marijuana for medical purposes is a viable path towards legalization, or given what you said about the federal restrictions, that's really not the way to go?
Well, I think it's mixed. I think on the one hand, under the medical marijuana laws that we have in, I guess, 15 states now, many people have easier access to buying marijuana in a way that's free from any significant legal risk. They still could, in principle, be arrested by the feds, but that seems to be very rare. So for people who want to purchase through the medical channels in those 15 states, the medical approach is certainly a plus. I think the negative is that approach seems hypocritical to some observers. They think that medicalization is just a backdoor method of legalization, and there's some merit to that suspicion, and maybe a lot of merit to that suspicion. And that that medicalization may even prevent full legalization if people, as in California, start to think that they don't want to mess with their de facto legalization under the medical approach and therefore stick with that rather than full legalization.
Now, you're an economist. Give us.
Sorry, I can't hear you.
Oh, can you hear me?
Oh,
now?
Yeah, you're back. You're back. Yes,
okay,
you're back.
Good. Right. You're an economist. Give me some more information about the fact that a lot of the growers in the Green Triangle of Mendocino and Humboldt and those counties in the north of California voted against legalizing marijuana under Prop 19.
Well, under the medical marijuana law, the growers in California had reasonably good confidence that they were not likely to be hassled by state authorities or federal authorities because of the Fed had said it wouldn't interfere with medical provision back in 2009. And so I think they were worried they were going to lose a relatively advantageous position that they had under the medical marijuana law, where they had been authorized, in effect, to supply it. Legalization would have meant tons of competition from just about anyone. And so the medical growers and many of the dispensaries were not happy about losing their relatively privileged position. So in that sense, they're no different than any other business in any country anywhere. Most businesses don't like competition. Competition isn't good for the businesses. Competition is good for the consumers, but the businesses would just as soon not have it.
So this is a rent-seeking behavior on the part of the growers.
Exactly. Rent-protecting behavior. Exactly.
Right. Now, you put forward in the op-ed piece that you wrote some arguments more or less from a libertarian point of view about why marijuana ought to be legalized. Could you review those for us?
Well, my perspective is that basically everything should be legal unless that activity has clear negative implications for other people. So the things that we call vices like prostitution, drug use, alcohol use, gambling, and so on. In a free society, the default should be that those things are legal, and the government only interferes with people's decisions when those decisions are harming others. So driving under the influence of alcohol or drugs is certainly something that the government should have a legitimate stake in trying to prevent. But simply using marijuana or alcohol or things like that is not legitimate intervention for the government because it's restricting the choices, reducing the freedom of individuals without any particular benefit. More broadly, even if you think that government should be reducing certain things because you regard them as undesirable, some people feel that way about marijuana use, prohibiting marijuana generates so many negative side effects, by forcing the market underground and leading to crime and corruption, that it's much worse than any negative effects that marijuana itself might have.
And do you advocate some sort of policy of getting this argument more widely understood and accepted?
Well, I certainly think that there's a segment of the electorate that would respond more to a very upfront, we should let people who want to smoke marijuana kind of argument than they do respond to the we'll get some tax revenues out of it, or we'll help sick people by medicalizing it, or things like that. Now, for other segments of the population, that's maybe not true. So I think it's a legitimate question for the legalization of movement, which style of convincing people is going to be the most effective. But my hunch is that we would be more effective overall if we were more upfront. We simply said, totally honestly, we think that adults should be able to use marijuana legally. Period. End of story, for whatever reasons they want.
Okay. Well, I want to thank you for, is there anything else you want to say on this subject?
No, I think it's clearly a topic that's going to go on for a long time. The organizers say that they're going to present Prop 19 or something like it again in 2012. So it's going to get discussion from various perspectives. What I hope is that people will consider it from all the perspectives, not just the tax revenue or medicalization side, but from these broader libertarian perspectives.
Okay, good. Thank you for your ideas and for expressing them today on Utopia News.
Thank you.